Hello, hello. This is the the first. This is the first installment of a new audio-only series that I'm trying out here on the YouTubes. I don't know, maybe I'll upload it to a podcast site or something when I figure out how to do that. But if you did not see a poll that I put on the YouTube dashboard, I was thinking about doing an audio only series, and that was mostly going to encompass topics that really couldn't be fleshed out to like a full rambly video that I normally do, just like little snippets I wanted to do like brief discussions of, and I could sort of human centipede them together into one video or audio recording as it would be. But part of that is because I just don't have a lot of time between work and wanting to watch movies and all this other stuff to really invest in the visual component of my videos, which, would be important. So, I do have a free editing software, DaVinci Resolve, which is pretty good, but I haven't had time to learn how to do all of the tricks and all the bells and whistles to really maximize that editing software to its fullest potential, which is why a lot of my videos are just me in my living room on my couch, looking into the camera and rambling for 20 minutes or something. And as well as the lighting in my apartment when I'm filming is always not very good unless I'm filming it like in the middle of the afternoon, and I can't do that because I'm working most afternoons unless it's during the weekend. And investing in like a nice lighting setup and all that stuff isn't really feasible, given I don't get too many views to really invest that kind of time and money into the channel. But I figured there's things I can use a microphone for anyway, so I bought a nice little microphone for these audio-only segments. But yeah, I mean, I'm not doing Tosh or Goosebumps numbers anymore in my videos. If you're listening to this, then it's because you are one of the hardcore people who have supported me on here for a while and are continuing to, in which case, I thank you. But what I'm trying to go for here is, maybe I can do these more often because it's a little bit easier for me to just kind of plug in a mic and record and then put some random image on the screen for you here on YouTube to look at. And, most of my like rambly videos where I'm just kind of talking about a topic, since I'm not incorporating a lot of like props or visual stuff into these, a lot of people have told me they just kind of listen to them, in the background or when they're driving to work or something. So I figured I could do these more often because they're a lot easier to kind of throw out there. So a couple topics that have come up in the last week, I kind of wanted to do like just mini discussions of them, and I'm looking forward to hearing any of your feedback in the comments. As always, as I'm legally required to do as a YouTuber, I guess I am that. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all of that good stuff. But without further ado, let's get back into those topics. The first one I wanted to talk about was the Morbius re-release that happened this last weekend from when I'm recording this. So if you hadn't heard, and if you have any internet presence, I'm pretty sure you already have, but Morbius, the not very good movie, and you can read my Letterboxd review if you're interested in my opinion, but the not very good movie that became a meme sensation upon its release for being bad, Sony re-released it in theaters for one weekend. Much ado was kind of made about this. I feel like people were bashing Sony for this decision because it's like, oh, they don't understand ironic memes. I don't think that's actually what was happening here, though. Um, as a background here, so lots of bad movies can, well, perhaps I'll go back a little further. There's different categories of bad movies. There's movies that are just boring, which is kind of almost the worst. There are movies that are morally reprehensible. They're bad because they are immoral in some way. Think like some of the Pure Flick stuff or like Dinesh D'Souza documentaries and stuff like that. Then there's bad movies that just fail in execution. But then there's the pocket of what we can call good bad movies. And those are sometimes, a lot of people don't like the label so bad it's good, but I think that's a perfectly valid label for these. But so bad it's good. Movies that are bad maybe because they're misguided or incompetently made, but they are enjoyable to watch and oftentimes ironically hilarious because of how bad they are. So, Troll 2, The Room, Neil Breen's stuff, Miami Connection, which is coming out from Vinegar Syndrome. That's a nice category. And I think Sony may be thinking with all of these memes that Morbius falls into that category of that's so bad it's good. But the thing is, Morbius is not that kind of bad movie. Morbius is bad because it's messy and poorly written. So it's bad in a more generic way. The only scene of Morbius that really fits into so bad it's good is the scene where Matt Smith, playing Milo, is dancing shirtless to this horrible song where the only English lyrics on the song are the words "have sex." The rest of it, I believe, is in like South African, Afrikaans, or Zulu or something like that. So I don't know what the other lyrics even translate to, but the other one is "have sex." And Matt Smith, possibly being the ugliest actor in the history of motion picture, dancing shirtless, sort of adds like an extra layer to this whole thing. Sony itself kind of gets that. There was a tweet they sent out on Mother's Day with the hashtag Moms for Morbius, and it featured just a gif of that scene of Matt Smith dancing, and I believe the caption was something along the lines of, "For mothers who prefer action over flowers," or something. So I don't think it's that Sony's re-release was because they thought people unironically started liking Morbius and wanted a chance to see in the theaters because the fandom, quote-unquote, didn't catch on until after the initial wave. What I think they were trying to do is they were trying to do kind of what Universal Studios is doing with Cats. If you remember, in December of 2019, Cats opened the same weekend as Rise of Skywalker, and it's actually a worse film than Rise of Skywalker, if you can believe that. I had to suffer through opening night of Cats because my fiance likes the musical and the songs in it, so I went to go see it with her, and the movie is pretty damn terrible. But what has happened, because of how weird that movie is with these 3D rendered animated models of motion captured actors looking like they have fursonas, and yet the one with the Taylor Smith one has boobs. It's there's a lot in there that's just sort of like odd creative choices that Universal has sort of steered into the skid to make Cats a so bad it's good cult classic. Like, as I'm speaking right now in the month of June 2022, my local Alamo Drafthouse has, I think, at least 2 showings of Cats this month because Universal is trying to push out this movie as a so bad it's good. And considering how badly Cats bombed, I can't blame them for trying to scrape up together some of that extra revenue, release the butthole cut and all. So I think that's what Sony's trying to do. I think Sony is trying to do to Morbius what Universal's doing to Cats. The other thing is that I believe it was last weekend at the same time, maybe it was a little bit earlier, but Morbius also finally dropped on digital for, PVOD renting and renting through streaming services and streaming providers. So the re-release was probably also just part of the marketing push to give more visibility to the digital release of Morbius, because obviously Sony doesn't have their own streaming service. They used to own Crackle way back when, if you remember that. So I think this was more marketing than anything. And when I looked, at least in my area, it was only a handful of theaters that got the Morbius re-release, and most of them were only showing the movie 1 or 2 showtimes a day anyway. Surprisingly, they weren't like super late showings. They were like usually like a 3 p.m. and a 9 p.m. So basically the 2 middle sets of the normal 4 movie showtimes or 4 sets in a day that a movie auditorium would show in that theater. They really should probably be embracing the midnight screening for Morbius. I mean, it does have horror elements. It is a vampire movie of sorts, so they could do that. But it's also that Morbius itself isn't a so bad it's good movie, aside from that Matt Smith scene and maybe the title card that says International Waters from that boat scene, because that's not how international waters law works, but whatever, international maritime law. So, I think it's only funny in relation to the memes. So I mean, if you have an audience which is participating in the theater or calling back or chanting "It's Morbin time," just like people at Rocky Horror chant back certain almost at this point pre-scripted lines to the film, then maybe you could get an enjoyable theater experience out of Morbius. But honestly, I don't think it's that kind of movie, so I think the memes will run their course, and they'll eventually die out unless, maybe it'll pop up every time Jared Leto has a new movie or 30 Seconds to Mars puts out a new album, if they're even still doing music. Or Morbius, the character, might still pop up in other Sony movies. Maybe he'll show up in Kraven the Hunter, or maybe Sony will still try to do some sort of Sinister Six movie. I don't know. But yeah, it's, plus I guess Michael Keaton's Vulture is now in the Morbius cinematic universe, or the Venom cinematic universe, or the Sony Spider-Man cinematic universe, or whatever Sony's calling their pathetic attempt to make a shared continuity using the creative bankruptcy of early 2000s Fox Marvel. But yeah, so that was my thoughts on the Morbius release. One of the other topics that was coming up this week, thanks to the release, I believe it was just this past week, they released these 2 new trailers for these movies, are movies that are being released by quote-unquote canceled talent. I'm putting canceled in quotes because what it means to be canceled seems to be fungible depending on the person. Like, Harvey Weinstein is absolutely canceled. If for some reason he was released from prison today, he's not getting back in the movie industry, no way, shape, or form. Unless he can completely bankroll stuff on his own, but I believe his legal defense has made him bankrupt, so I don't think that's happening. But there's other people who have run afoul of various things, most of them valid, to be quite honest, like Mel Gibson. But Mel Gibson still has a career. He's still doing, Fat Man and some of these other, like, VOD stuff. He's turning up in Father Stew, things like that. So Mel Gibson still has a career, but he's never going to be the early 90s Lethal Weapon 3 height of his career Mel Gibson. But he's not really, quote-unquote, canceled. He's just sort of there. But I mean, also Heartbreak Ridge got, Oscar nominations or whatever, so Hollywood seems to have kind of sort of not really forgiven Mel Gibson. And that's sort of the category we're in now, where there's people who are 100% they're not getting back. Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose, people like that. But then you have people who are on they're kind of straddling the fence here. And let's talk about Louis C.K. So Louis C.K., a couple of years ago, during the height of the Me Too movement, it came out that he was exposing himself to women either without permission or with a cursory level of permission, where they thought he was joking, but he was actually serious, and he used that to expose himself and perform a sexual act on himself in front of women who did not want that to happen in front of them. So this came out, he released kind of a self-serving narcissistic apology, and then he went dark for like 6 months, maybe, before he got back on stage doing his stand-up. So Louis C.K. is kind of an interesting figure in this whole Me Too thing, because if you're ranking terrible things that people have done, there's like the Harvey Weinstein outright rape, alleged, I guess I should say. I don't know if he's been convicted, but you have that allegation. And some people, if they're ranking the terrible things these people have done, from like worse to not as worse, I guess Louis C.K. is sort of on the lower or middle of that pack, if you want to rank severity. So I think his fans have been more forgiving of him than of other figures where bad things have come out about them. So I think that has sort of helped his fan base come back. Now, full disclosure, I was a huge fan of Louis C.K.'s work before these allegations came out and he admitted to them. I guess I had heard some rumblings about the allegations before, but they were always sort of like rumors, and there was not really people going on the record about it. But I was a huge fan of him. I loved Lucky Louie, his HBO show, or Louie, his FX show. I thought he was probably one of the best stand-ups of all time. He co-wrote this great movie Chris Rock directed called I Think I Love My Wife, which is terribly underrated. It's a really great movie. Directed Pootie Tang. I mean, he's done a lot of really good, funny work. But after this stuff came out, and after his reaction or response to it, where he never really took responsibility or realized what he did to the women who were his victims in this case, I've just felt a little uneasy about supporting or going back to his work. Like, he's released, I believe, 2 stand-up specials since his quote-unquote cancellation, one of which won a Grammy recently, so I'm not sure how canceled you can be when you're still winning mainstream awards. But he's done that. But it seems like his mainstream success was never going to come back. Like, he can release he can do his stand-up specials, and the people who still support him will buy tickets to see him stand up, and he releases his specials through his own individual website, so he doesn't have another, there's no Netflix, there's no other corporation involved. It's completely just released by him. They pay him, they download it from his direct website. He has a direct relationship with his fans. That's whatever. He's sort of built himself the infrastructure where the only people who can cancel him would be his fans. Basically, if his fans decided to not support him, then he would be gone. But as long as his fans do support him, and that fan support is enough to monetarily keep him from being in the poorhouse, then he can keep doing what he wants to do indefinitely. He's sort of made himself cancel-proof as long as he still has fans. But he's never going to get back to the level of mainstream success he was at. At the time of the revelation of what he did and his subsequent apology admittance, he was in the run-up of releasing a movie that he starred, wrote, and directed in called I Love You, Daddy. In fact, there were already Oscar screeners for this movie that were sent out to voting members of the Academy. This back when they still sent out physical screeners. Now it's all through their streaming hub there. So pirated copies of this movie have been floating around ever since. Somebody had sent me a copy so I could review it. So I do have a video YouTube review of my thoughts on that film, and it's a very icky film to watch post-allegation knowledge. It's not necessarily a bad movie, but it's kind of skeevy to watch with the benefit of hindsight. But since then, he hasn't done any acting or directing roles in any sort of short or feature films that I know of. I know he was he released a new stand-up special recently, and he paid for an infomercial to advertise it, and he aired it at 2 a.m. or something on IFC. He bought that, but he also uploaded it to YouTube, and I watched it out of curiosity mostly, and admittedly it is funny. Louis C.K. is still a very funny man, but it's just so hard to support him until he, or if he ever comes to grip with what he did in a truly apologetic way, make good with the victims, so. But, and this is a sort of a long way around the barn to get to this topic, he released a trailer for a movie he directed. Even though I Love You, Daddy, he bought back the rights to it from, I believe Orchid had the distribution rights, but he bought back the rights to it, so he could release it through his website at any time. I mean, there are maybe mainstream actors in it who maybe don't want to be associated with it anymore. Chloe Grace Moretz, Rose Byrne, John Malkovich. Well, John Malkovich does a lot of bad VOD stuff now, so who knows what he would want to be associated with. But yeah, so I maybe he just doesn't want the hassle of that. But, so he hasn't released I Love You, Daddy in any official way, but apparently he has directed a movie called 4th of July, and it is starring and written by a different comedian. I forget his name. I think it's Joe List, if I'm not mistaken. And it's sort of a semi-autobiographical account of that comedian being a recovering alcoholic and visiting his family during the holidays, or during 4th of July, if you want to call that the holidays. um, and Louis C.K. himself, I guess, is only in the movie for 2 scenes. He plays a therapist for the main character, which, let's I'm not even going to touch that one. So yeah, I guess he's trying to maybe self-release it in some movie theaters. I don't know if he's doing what they call four-walling, where a filmmaker will rent out a theater, just kind of like you or I could go to a movie theater and rent out an auditorium for a showing. And then, so in four-walling, somebody does that. They just rent out an auditorium in a movie theater, and they are responsible for pushing out the showtime and selling tickets. The person who four walls, they pay the theater a rental fee for the theater. Any tickets that they sell to the movie, the filmmaker would keep, or the renter would keep, but the theater would still keep any revenue from any concessions bought for that showing. So basically, you spend, let's say, $1,000. It's less now. Since COVID, it's been a lot cheaper to rent a theater because they've tried to push that down to like a retail market. But you spend like $1,000 to rent your auditorium, and then if you sell it out at $15 a ticket, then maybe you'll make a slight profit on it, and that's what your take is. When Netflix was first releasing like Roma in some of their movies in theaters, since regular theaters wouldn't release something that was day and date on a streaming service pre-COVID, Netflix supposedly was four-walling Roma in some of their movies that they were releasing. They don't do that anymore. Netflix now has contract with, I think, Cinemark to show some of their movies like Red Notice and Army of the Dead early, and Alamo has shown a number of different Netflix movies. I've seen El Camino and Dolomite Is My Name and Mank and a bunch of other Netflix movies that I thought I wanted to see on the big screen there. I'm very glad I saw Mank on the big screen, but that's neither here nor there. So Louis C.K. has this movie, even though his last movie is still sitting on a shelf, technically, even though it's readily available on like torrent sites and pirating places. And he has this other movie, and is it going to get distribution? Will it get release? I mean, it'll get something. It's probably not going to get picked up by a mainstream American distributor, but there's certainly like small distribution companies. Certainly Europe doesn't seem to care about sex criminals, since Woody Allen and Roman Polanski can still get funding and releasing of their movies very easily. I guess... I'm not going to touch the Woody Allen, Roman Polanski stuff here, but it's kind of odd that they can still get their easily funded releasing. I mean, granted... The issue, I guess, with them is that, Louis C.K. is talented as well, but Roman Polanski and Woody Allen are also both very talented. It seems like it might be easier to cancel people who commit sex crimes if they just happen to not be talented, like, Brett Ratner or something, as opposed to these auteurs and stuff like that. And, prior to the revelation of what Louis C.K. did, he was often compared to a French New Wave art director or something, that was sort of the path he was going on. In fact, he even worked with Woody Allen on Blue Jasmine. Louis C.K. had a role in that. And then I Love You, Daddy, the plot of that movie was very much about a Woody Allen type director who may be grooming the main character's daughter, and how he feels about that, since the Woody Allen type director is also his hero. So a lot of I Love You, Daddy is about Louis C.K. sort of under the surface dealing with his own predilections in that way, which is very apparent when you watch it post the revelation of those. I don't know how the movie played prior. It probably just played as a Woody Allen allegory at the time. Louis C.K. has this movie, and my guess is it might get into a handful of theaters. I mean, a lot of bullshit can still get into theaters these days, and with a minor limited release. And then it'll probably get a VOD release where people can rent it, or they can Redbox it, or what have you. But I don't think and it's not going to get picked up by like Lionsgate or A24 or anything at this point. That he's kind of untouchable there. But on top of Louis C.K., sort of a I guess he would be considered a worse sex criminal from the allegations against him. But Kevin Spacey, so he's been filming a few different movies. There's an Italian movie he's in. There's I think he has at least like 3 or 4 projects in the can right now. But a trailer dropped. I can't remember the name of it, but he basically plays like a hitman or something. And Jake Weber is in it, though he very clearly was probably only shot for like a single day in a single set away from all the other actors. And Rebecca De Mornay is in it. And from the trailer, she actually has scenes with Kevin Spacey. And, how far has Rebecca De Mornay fallen? She used to be a respected actress, Hand That Rocks the Cradle, Tie That Binds. Yeah, what the hell happened to Rebecca De Mornay? But it seems like, there's a few different production companies that seem to be willing to work with Kevin Spacey. Now, the foreign ones I get, because, again, European investors, European producers, they don't seem to care about sex crimes as far as the people they will hire, the people they will bankroll. There just seems to be a different feeling about all of that there. I forget if Minamata, the Johnny Depp movie, and I'm not going to go into the whole Johnny Depp thing here, but I think that may have also been funded by foreign money. But this other movie where Kevin Spacey, it's like a first name and then like 3 numbers or something. But this Kevin Spacey movie, it's definitely an American movie. It's English language, but it seems like it's probably made by the kinds of people who are bankrolling all of those Bruce Willis movies that have been coming out for the past 10 years. What Red Letter Media has called the geezer teasers. That's kind of what it seems like it is. That it's just sort of this exploitation action movie that is using the famous name of a once bankable but now disgraced star to sell this piece of crap. But Kevin Spacey is another one of those where, he was a very talented actor. And, I feel like post-cancellation, people don't want to say that some of these people had talent, but it's okay to say that they were talented while still not stultifying or minimizing the terrible things that they've done. I mean, Kevin Spacey, he won an Oscar for The Usual Suspects, the Verbal Kint role. He was John Doe in Seven. He's had roles in, American Beauty and L.A. Confidential. House of Cards was a very good show for those first 4 seasons. Kevin Spacey was a pretty great actor. It's just that he was preying on, or allegedly preying on, young men pretty regularly. And yeah, it was like hostile work environments, hitting on PAs. There was a lot of bad stuff that came out about him. But if you are a low-budget distributor or investor and your moral scruples are not that high, you can get a talented actor who at pretty much, I'm sure it's a bargain basement cost at this point, because not many people will hire him, into your movie to get yourself a little bit more attention. And there might be people who hate watch or irony watch a movie like this, because it seems like Louis C.K.'s 4th of July movie is trying to play itself as a regular movie, a regular, like, indie dramedy that you might see, something close to, like, a Dan in Real Life, that Steve Carell movie. That's the kind of feeling I got from the trailer of that. But this other movie is just trying to be, like, direct-to-video crap. It has no pretensions or aspersions to be anything other than the piece of shit that it very clearly is. And so I think it's just trying to be one of those movies where it's trying to get your money from having you pay like $6 to hate watch it on Amazon Prime. But it's just sort of weird that, what is the limit that makes you completely and totally canceled and unemployable in the entertainment industry? Like, definitely Harvey Weinstein. I mean, even if he weren't currently incarcerated. But who else who has been quote unquote canceled, and the right wingers, they'll always deride this as like, oh, cancel culture, and oh, it's a violation of free speech or whatever, and that's not really what this is. It's just about holding people accountable for their actions. Or, I mean, some people are quote unquote canceled not because of any malfeasance, but because they just have shitty opinions, like Gina Carano. But it's not that they're canceled, because I put people like Gina Carano in a different category. And even she, I mean, yeah, so whatever. She was fired from Mandalorian, but she, the Daily Wire, like the Tucker Carlson, they have a movie studio now. They make to make their like right wing movies. So she still has an income. She still has a fan base. Whatever. She can still get in there. But she is mostly, it's just because, hey, people who have different values than you, people who believe in, trans rights and, not horrible conservative right-wing garbage, maybe don't want to watch stuff that you are in because they can't separate how much of a shitty person you are from the characters you're playing. Now, 50% of the United States is right-wing, and 50% of the United States is, centrist neoliberals, I guess. So if one half of the country still likes you, then you're still going to make an income. It's just, maybe the stuff you work in is not going to be like the super mainstream stuff, because the super mainstream stuff, of which Star Wars is, it has to appeal to all sides of the bracket. And even when Star Wars pisses off the right-wingers, as apparently for some reason Last Jedi did, of all things, the alt-right, nerd sphere, like the Midnight's Edge and those kind of shitty YouTube channels, they're still going to watch the next Star Wars product, and even if it's just to hate watch it. So, there's no harm in that. But I don't know. It's just, these are kind of rambly thoughts, but I was just thinking about how, quote unquote, being canceled isn't really being canceled for most people. Like cancellation might work different in like the political sphere, like whether Andrew Cuomo is ever going to have a political career again, or Anthony Weiner for that matter. Probably not. In the entertainment sphere, it's all about money and capitalism, and what can you make money off of. If Louis C.K. still has a fan base that is willing to pay for his product, then he's not canceled. If people are still willing to invest money into a movie with Kevin Spacey because they think they'll get a return on their investment, then he is not canceled. That's sort of, you are really only canceled when you become unable to generate a profit to the people investing in you. And it seems like in order to do that, you have to do something so beyond the pale that no one beyond any of the political spectrum can support you. And that seems to be where the line is on cancellation. So I guess that this is kind of a backdoor talk on just my general feelings about cancel culture and what it is and what it is not. It's mostly just sort of an attempt to hold people accountable, but also in addition to whether they can be held accountable legally or not, and how the constraints of the capitalist mode of production can keep that accountability from being very strong. Anyway, I have rambled on now for 33 or so minutes. I think this would be a good place to stop off for this first episode where I had those two basic topics. So, tell me if you have listened to this whole rambly gobbledygook. What did you think? Do you think these audio-only entries are worth doing on a more common basis, where I can sort of speak extemporaneously about whatever topic might come up for that week? Or, I can just plug in this microphone and just pontificate about anything that sort of comes to mind. I'm probably going to keep it mostly movie-focused, as opposed to just like my general thoughts about, the January 6th committee or something more political. Like, I kind of have more fun talking about movies in that regard. But if you have any ideas of what you'd like to hear from as far as these audio videos, let me know. Moving forward, I do have a Vinegar Syndrome a halfway to Black Friday order that should be delivered in a few days, so I'll do that on camera. Unboxings, anything I do for like a taste test of like a food or a soda, any of those I'll do on camera. And once I have time to play around a little bit more with the editing software, or maybe if I do buy like a better like ring light or something and I can invest a bit more in the visual style of my videos, then maybe I'll do some more of those. But in the meantime, these audio only stuff are kind of good. I might even do a couple Dave's Film Faves as audio, because normally that would just be me talking and I would splice in like still images, but then even still images can still get copyright strikes even if they're fair use, so that can be annoying. So maybe I'll just do an audio only one on some of those as well. But let me know anything you'd like to hear me talk about in this particular setting. But thank you, everybody. I hope the audio quality for this was not too bad. I got the Samsung, not Samsung, microphone here because I heard good things about it, and I'm just using Audacity to record here. So let me know if it all sounds good on your end, if you're liking how it sounds, all that good stuff. And we will talk again next time. Thank you, everybody.